You show up. Every single day, you show up. You answer the emails. You meet the deadlines. You smile at the right moments. You say the right things in meetings. You laugh at jokes that do not land. You hold doors open. You ask people how their weekend was, and you actually listen to the answer. From the outside, your life looks like it is working, and that is the most exhausting part of all. Because on the inside, behind the calendar and the completed tasks and the coffee you drink just to feel something warm, there is this quiet, heavy stillness. Like background noise that never stops. Like a gray sky that has been gray for so long, you have forgotten what sunlight actually felt like on your skin. You are not falling apart. You are functioning perfectly, dangerously perfectly, and nobody knows. This is not sadness the way the movies show sadness. There is no dramatic breakdown, no crying on the floor, no obvious sign that something is wrong. This is something far more subtle, far more insidious, and far more common than anyone is willing to admit. This is what psychologists are beginning to call functional depression. And the reason it destroys people slowly is because it never looks like destruction at all. You know that feeling when you finish a full day of work, cross everything off your list, get into bed at a reasonable hour, and feel absolutely nothing. Not relief, not satisfaction, not peace, just nothing. Like you are watching your own life through a window. Like you are an actor who has memorized all their lines, but cannot remember why they auditioned for the role in the first place. You are productive. You are responsible. You are, by every external measure, doing well. But something is missing. Something deep and unnamed. Something you cannot explain without sounding ungrateful, so you do not explain it at all. You just keep going. That is the first and most dangerous hallmark of functional depression, the ability to perform life while quietly grieving it. And here is what nobody tells you. The performance itself becomes the prison. Part 1. The architecture of emptiness. Let us start with what is actually happening inside you, not clinically, coldly, but honestly. The human brain is wired for meaning, not success, not productivity, not achievement. Meaning, purpose, connection, the felt sense that what you are doing matters not to your boss, not to your bank account, but to something deeper inside you that does not have a name but has always had a presence. When that sense of meaning goes quiet, the brain does not shut down. It adapts. It creates what psychologists call a dissociative buffer, a kind of emotional insulation that allows you to keep functioning even when the internal world has gone dark. Think of it like a building with the lights off. The structure is still there. The walls are solid. The doors open and close. But no one is home in the way that matters. You have not collapsed. You have compartmentalized. And society rewards you for it. Handsomely. This is where the philosophical tension begins. And it is a tension Carl Jung understood with terrifying clarity. Jung wrote about the persona, the social mask every human wears to navigate the world. The face you show at work. The version of yourself that is presentable, capable, agreeable. The self that knows how to perform belonging even when it feels none. But Jung was very clear about what happens when the persona becomes the only self you know. When the mask is on for so long, you forget it is a mask. You stop asking who you are beneath it. And that forgetting, that slow, quiet erasure of your authentic interior, is not a personal failure. It is a survival strategy that has outlived its usefulness. Part 2. Where this was born. Here is where it gets important. Here is where the roots are. Functional depression does not begin in adulthood. It does not begin when the job becomes too much, or the relationship falls apart, or the ambition runs dry. It begins much earlier, in the moments when you were young and learned something devastating, that your emotional world was a burden. Maybe it was not said directly. It rarely is. Maybe it was the parent who was too overwhelmed to hold space for your feelings, so you learned to hold them yourself. Maybe it was the environment that praised you only for achievement, for the A, for the trophy, for the behavior, never simply for being. Maybe it was the subtle but powerful message that love was conditional, that belonging had a price, that the price was your performance. And so you became very, very good at performing. You learned to translate your inner chaos into outer productivity. You discovered that when you were useful, you were safe. When you were capable, you were loved. When you were functioning, even if you were fracturing, you were valued. This is what developmental psychologists call a dismissive adaptation, the unconscious decision to dismiss your own emotional needs in order to preserve relational safety. It was not weakness. At 7, at 9, at 12 years old, it was genius. It was survival. But you are not 7 anymore. And the strategy that kept you emotionally safe in a world you could not control is now the very thing keeping you emotionally sealed in a world you desperately want to feel. The child who learned to never need anything grew into the adult who does not know how to want anything. Sit with that. Because this is the invisible wound beneath functional depression, not the inability to feel, but the deeply conditioned belief that feeling is dangerous, that needing is weak, that wanting more joy, more aliveness, more meaning is somehow ungrateful or self-indulgent. And so you work, you produce, you show up, you perform, and the emptiness deepens. Not because you are broken, but because a part of you is still protecting the child who needed to disappear in order to survive. Part 3. The mask that became a face. Here is the cruelty of functional depression, and it is worth naming without softening it. The better you are at functioning, the less help you receive. Because you do not look like someone who needs help. You look like someone who has it together. You are the reliable one, the strong one, the one people come to when they need something, because they absolutely know that you will deliver. And every time someone says, "I don't know what I'd do without you," something in you feels two things simultaneously, a flicker of warmth and a deeper cold. Because you know that their need for your strength leaves no room for your own. This is what Brené Brown might call the armor of competence, the way high-functioning people use their capability as a shield against vulnerability. Not because they are manipulative, but because somewhere along the line, vulnerability felt like annihilation. The armor works brilliantly. It protects you from judgment, from disappointment, from the terrifying exposure of being truly seen in a moment of need. But armor is heavy, and you have been wearing it for a very long time. The Jungian concept here is the shadow, all the parts of yourself that you have learned to suppress, to hide, to deny. The part that is exhausted, the part that is resentful, the part that wants to scream into a pillow and ask anyone to just take care of things for a single afternoon. Those parts do not disappear because you suppress them. They go underground. They become the gray sky, the numbness, the feeling of watching your own life from the outside. The shadow is not your enemy. It is the part of you that remembers you are human. Part 4. Why you cannot just snap out of it. People who have never experienced functional depression often say things like, "But you have so much to be grateful for," or "Just focus on the positives," or the most well-meaning and utterly useless, "Have you tried exercise?" And here is the thing: you probably have tried exercise. You probably do have gratitude. You probably know on an intellectual level that your life is not objectively bad. But functional depression is not a logic problem. It does not respond to logical solutions because it is not located in the part of the brain that processes logic. Neuroscience has been very clear about this. Research on persistent low-grade depressive states, what the DSM categorizes as persistent depressive disorder, or dysthymia, shows that the issue is not a dramatic chemical catastrophe. It is a slow, sustained dampening of the brain reward system, specifically the dopaminergic pathways that connect effort to satisfaction, action to meaning, achievement to pleasure. In simpler terms, the wiring between doing and feeling has been worn thin. You do the thing, you feel nothing. You do more things, you feel less. And because the brain is adaptive, it begins to normalize the numbness. The absence of joy stops feeling like absence. It just starts feeling like reality. This is why willpower does not fix it. This is why productivity does not fix it. This is why the promotion, the vacation, the new relationship, the fresh start, none of it fixes it. Because you are not bringing a starving person food. You are bringing food to someone whose sense of hunger has been switched off. The problem is not the feast. The problem is the switch. Part 5. The roles you play. Let us talk about the specific ways functional depression hides inside the roles you perform every day. Because it is a shapeshifter, and it is wearing the faces of things that look like strength. The overachiever. This is the person who fills every hour because stillness is terrifying. Not because they are lazy, the absolute opposite. Stillness is dangerous because stillness is where the feeling lives. And the feeling is something the overachiever has not made peace with yet. So they schedule, they optimize, they hustle, and they call it ambition, which is partly true. But beneath the ambition is a child who learned that being still meant being a burden. The caretaker. This is the person who pours everything into everyone else, partners, friends, family, colleagues, with a generosity that looks saintly from the outside. But look closer. The caretaker does not receive well. Compliments make them uncomfortable. Help feels like weakness. Their worth is entirely located in their usefulness to others. Because at some point, love was taught as a transaction, and they have been paying the bill ever since. The quiet one. This is the person who has become so good at existing without taking up space that people rarely notice they are struggling. They are described as easygoing, low maintenance, chill. What they actually are is someone who learned very young that their emotional needs were inconvenient, so they made those needs invisible, and after long enough, those needs became invisible even to themselves. The cynic. This one is the most misunderstood. The person who rolls their eyes at optimism, who deflects with dark humor, who seems detached from caring. Cynicism is not the absence of feeling. It is calcified hope. It is what happens when someone cared so deeply, so repeatedly, and was so repeatedly disappointed, that caring itself became the threat. The armor here is not competence. It is indifference. And it is just as heavy. Do you recognize yourself in any of these? Or in all of them, depending on the day? Because that recognition matters. That recognition is the first moment of contact between the mask and the core. Part 6. The cost of continuity here is what sustained functional depression does to a person over time, and it is important to name this not to frighten you, but to make visible what you have been quietly absorbing. It erodes desire. Not just romantic desire, the desire for anything. The desire to create something, to try something new, to imagine a different version of your own future. When the reward system is dampened long enough, the imagination follows. Because imagination requires hope, and hope requires the belief that what you want is actually possible for you, not just possible in theory, but possible for someone like you. It erodes identity. Who are you when you are not performing? When the role is not required, when nobody is watching, when there is nothing to complete, who shows up in that space? For many people navigating functional depression, the answer is frightening in its blankness. The role has been worn so long that the self beneath it feels like a stranger. It erodes connection. Not because you push people away. In fact, many high-functioning depressed people are extraordinarily socially skilled. But there is a difference between being present and being intimate. Being present is showing up. Being intimate is letting someone see the parts you have learned to hide. And intimacy requires the belief that those parts are worth seeing, that they will not be too much, that you will not be abandoned for your realness. And it is this erosion of desire, identity, and connection that makes functional depression not just painful, but existentially costly. You are not just tired, you are losing time, not to crisis, but to the slow, quiet theft of your own aliveness. Part 7. The philosophical anchor. Friedrich Nietzsche, not someone typically associated with gentleness, wrote something that carries remarkable grace on this subject. He described what he called the will to power not as dominance over others, but as the drive toward self-overcoming, the deep human need to grow, to expand, to become. And he identified the tragedy of those who suppress this drive not out of weakness, but out of fear, who direct their energy entirely outward, into performance and production and usefulness, and leave nothing for the internal becoming that makes a life feel like a life. He called this nihilism, not in the dramatic philosophical sense, but in the quiet daily sense. The sense that nothing quite matters, that the motion of life is motion without direction, that you are going through something without going toward anything. This is the philosophical core of functional depression. It is not sadness, it is the absence of toward. The loss of the felt sense that your life is moving in a direction that is yours. And Albert Camus, writing in a different key, but striking the same chord, argued that the deepest human question is not whether life is worth living, but whether the life you are living is actually your own. Are you living your life, or are you managing it? There is a difference, a vast, felt, irreducible difference. And somewhere inside you, beneath the productivity and the performance and the armor that has served you so faithfully for so long, you already know which one it is. Part 8. The moment of contaxo. What does movement look like? Not recovery as a project, not healing as a checklist, but the first honest movement toward your own aliveness. It begins with something radical in its simplicity. It begins with naming it to yourself, not to a therapist yet, not to a friend, not in a journal entry that is carefully worded in case someone reads it, just to yourself, in the private space of your own awareness. I am not okay, not in a catastrophic way, not in a way that requires emergency, but in the quiet, honest, unperformed way that acknowledges, what I have been calling functioning is also a form of hiding, and I am tired of hiding from myself. That moment, that single, private moment of honest self-contact, is what Jung called the beginning of individuation, the process of becoming who you actually are rather than who it was necessary to be. Healing isn't always dramatic. It doesn't look like a huge breakthrough from the outside. Sometimes, it looks like someone sitting quietly in their car before going into work, or staring at the ceiling at a.m., finally allowing themselves to feel the weight of everything they've been carrying, without immediately trying to fix it. It's the moment the mask you wear finally acknowledges the real person underneath. And that's not the end of anything. It's the first honest beginning. Before we get to the core truth, there are some things that need to be said very clearly. You are not weak for feeling this. You are not broken. You are not ungrateful. You are not failing. You are someone who learned, in conditions that required it, to prioritize the external world at the expense of your internal world. You developed an extraordinary skill at managing the surface of your life, and that skill kept you safe. It earned you love. It built the life you have right now. It's not a flaw. It's a wound that wore the costume of a superpower. And the people who are hardest on themselves for experiencing this kind of functional depression are almost always the people who cared the most, who felt the most, who wanted, and still want, the most from their lives. I'm not talking about material things. I mean that deep, aching, human wanting for a life that feels real, for connection that goes beneath the surface, for mornings that don't require a huge effort just to get through. Your sensitivity is not your sickness. It's your signal. The very fact that you feel the gray, that you notice the numbness, that you're here right now, trying to understand what's happening inside you, that is not evidence of failure. That is evidence of a core self that has not given up. Now, here is the final truth. The one this entire conversation has been building toward. Functional depression is not the enemy. It is a messenger. It's your psyche, that deep, intelligent, survival-oriented system that has been running your life, sending you the only signal it knows how to send when something important is being neglected. And what is being neglected? It's not your productivity. It's not your performance. It's not your output. It's you, the version of you that exists beneath the usefulness, beneath the competence, beneath all the roles you play. The you that doesn't have to earn its place in the room. The you that doesn't have to justify its existence through achievement. The you that is allowed to want things: rest, joy, meaning, play, stillness, without immediately converting those wants into tasks to complete. Functional depression isn't telling you that your life is wrong. It is telling you that the life you are living has been designed almost entirely around what you do, with almost nothing reserved for who you are. And who you are, that formless, quiet, still thing beneath all the doing, has been incredibly patient. It has waited through the promotions and the deadlines and the social events and the performance reviews. It has waited through years of waking up to an alarm and going to sleep with nothing left in the tank. It is still waiting, not with urgency, not with anger, just with the quiet, enduring presence of something that knows it's real, even when you've forgotten to look. The gray sky you feel is not a life sentence. It's a landscape that formed when your inner world was neglected for long enough. And landscapes change, not because you force them to, but because you finally turn toward them. With honesty, with gentleness, with the radical willingness to stop performing your life long enough to actually enter it. You showed up today. You always show up. But what if just once, not for anyone else, not for any outcome, you showed up for yourself? Not the self that delivers, not the self that manages, not the self that holds everything together so it doesn't all fall apart. The self that is tired, the self that is quietly grieving something it can't fully name, the self that has been waiting beneath all the noise and the function and the perfect execution of a life that looks fine from the outside, waiting for you to finally look inward and say, I see you, I know you're there, and I am not going to keep performing over you. That is where it begins. Not with a plan, not with a system, not with 10 steps toward a better morning routine. It begins with a single moment of honest, unperformed, private contact with your own truth. The mask served you well. Now, it's time to remember what it was protecting. So, I have a question for you. Which truth in this hit closest to home? The role you recognized yourself in? The childhood survival strategy that became an adult prison? The realization that you've been managing your life instead of living it? Let that question sit with you. Don't rush to answer it. Don't immediately convert it into an action plan. Just let it live in you for a moment. Because the willingness to sit with the question, without immediately solving it, might be the most honest thing you've done in a very long time. And honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's inconvenient, even when it disrupts the performance you've spent years perfecting, honesty is always the beginning of coming home. Thank you for listening. If this resonated, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you're struggling, please remember that reaching out to a therapist or a mental health professional is a sign of incredible strength. Take care.